this is diagramming a story, and diagramming a story involves using this pyramid that we've seen quite a few times now. We have our exposition, okay, and then we have our rising action going up, 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 and up to the climax of the story. That's when it's bang, everything that's like the most exciting or intense moment of the story happens, and then back down, the falling action to the ending, which is the resolution of the story. Okay, so let's go ahead and map this out together. We're going to diagram the short story Stray. So the story, of course, Stray, and our author is, and I'm going to try to use a different color just so it kind of pops out a little bit more for you while you're watching it, is Cynthia Rylant. Oh, hello, Cynthia, not Sabinthia. All right, so the main events in the story. So this is where, oh, nope, we better not start there. We better start down here with exposition. My apologies. Exposition is where the story gets started. Okay, this is where we learn of the characters, okay? Characters, the setting, and then the incident. That inciting incident is down here in the exposition, the incident that sets the story in motion. All right, so the characters. We know we have Doris. We have Doris and her parents. Okay, and their names are we'll start with Mr. Lacey, I guess. Mr. Lacey, why don't we just do this here? And Mr. and Mrs. Lacey. Okay, so that is, and I'm actually going to make this go a little bit smaller so we can fit some more good info in there. Okay, so Doris and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lacey. All right, so the setting is the next thing that we're going to get to. It is the Lacey's home. On a snowy winter day in the present. Oh, Mrs. Q, what is going on? And you know what? I've had my coffee today, lots of it. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe my fingers are just typing too fast. All right, the Lacey's home on a snowy winter day in the present. Okay, and then the incident, that is the next part. What incident sets the story in motion? Well, a dog wanders onto the Lacey's property. Oh. All right. Okay. So that is our exposition. This is the beginning of the story where all the things are starting to form, okay? The puzzle's starting to form. Doris and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lacey, we learn about them. They're at their home. They're in the neighborhood. It's very snowy. Remember, those icicles were like 3 feet long. That means, holy moly, they've been there for a very long time, and it's very freezing for them to stay up for that long. And then a dog wanders onto the Lacey's property. So imagine this poor doggy. He's just freezing cold. All right, so I'm kind of getting tired of red. How about purple? Not that one. Okay. All right, so what are the main events in the story? What complications make it difficult for characters to reach their goals? All right, so Doris, she brings the dog inside, right? I don't know, would you guys do that? If you find a dog, would you just bring it in your house? I mean, maybe. I don't know. But she knew her parents wouldn't like it, right? But her father plans to bring it to the pound when the snow clears. this down a little bit. All right, and let's see. So as Doris feeds the stray, this is the next thing that we're going to write. So as Doris feeds the stray who is staying in the basement. Oh no! What did I do? Hold on, let's get it back. Okay, there. There we go. Feeds the stray dog who is staying in the basement. Poor doggy. Well, I guess it's better than being out in the cold, right? She starts to become attached. Okay, despite trying not to. Because as we all know, it would be very, very hard to bring a doggy into your home who was out on the streets, and you know you're not going to get to keep it, so she's trying her hardest not to get attached to that dog. All right, so more main events. This is probably, one of the most important, I would say. I mean, they're all important events, but she knew this moment would come. And so the weather finally clears up. Finally clears up. And Mr. Lacey loads up the dog. She knew this day would come. She knew this moment would happen, but she wasn't ready for it. It's like you think you're ready, and then it happens, and you just weren't ready at all. I think in the back of her mind, she thought, well, maybe there's a chance, right, that he won't. But nope, he loaded it up and took him. Okay, so the next main event that's on our, remember this is our rising action. We were talking about rising action here. The next thing that happens is Lacey, poor thing, and actually, I'm sorry, I don't want to write Lacey. I want to say Doris sulks in her room. And what does it mean to sulk? If you are sulking, you are sad, you are depressed. There's just nothing that could change your mood if you're sulking, okay? It's just one of those things where when you're sulking about something, you just kind of have to get over it on your own, Okay, so Doris sulks in her room. She's very, very sad. She's crying. She basically cries herself to sleep because she's so sad. Okay, so finally, she wakes up, same day. She feels hungry, right? So she decides to go out to the kitchen to grab some food, and her parents, they don't baby her. They didn't wake her up to eat her dinner. She comes out and she sees that dinner's over. She missed it, and her parents are like, well, whatever. They're not gonna go and dote on her. Basically, she notices that dinner's over. Her parents are drinking coffee, and they left her a cold biscuit. But was she upset about it? No, not really. She was more upset that the dog was gone, of course. But when she finally emerges, she discovers that the dad brought the dog home. So she was surprised at that. So let's go ahead and add that to our rising action, because that's almost to the climax. So when she emerges from her room, she discovers, oh, hello. She discovers that her father brought the dog home. Okay, so let me move this down. These are our rising action points, and I'm actually going to separate these a little bit just so they're easier to see. Okay, Like I said before, of course, if you need to pause the video, go ahead and pause it so you get all this important information in your graphic organizer, okay? Because you will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points in your rising action. All right, so moving on to our climax. Here it is. This is the most exciting and intense moment of the story, and it just seems that everything's gonna fall into place. And I'm gonna change my color again. All right, so it is when Doris finally emerges, she discovers that her father did not leave the dog at the pound. So can you imagine? I don't know why that's I covered it up. Oh man. Oh well. All right, so let's go ahead and do that here. So when Doris finally emerges, she discovers that her father does have a heart. He did not leave the dog at the pound. If I could type, that'd be awesome. So he brings the dog home, even though, you know, they don't have a lot of money, they can't afford to have a dog, but he would rather know that he did something good for this dog than leave it at the pound. He said he wouldn't even leave an ant at the pound. All right, so that was the most exciting moment in the story for sure. Okay, let's go down here. This is our falling action now. There's the falling action, and let's see. Let's go ahead and circle it in red. No, it's not gonna let me. Okay, maybe. Oh. All right. Well, anyways, I can change my color. Let's do green. All right. So loose ends of the story. Well, Mr. Lacey goes on to explain why he couldn't leave the dog at the pound. So these are, we finally, you know, he brought the dog back and we're like, okay, that's awesome, and here's why. So Mr. Lacey explains. So Mr. Lacey explains why he could not leave the dog at the pound. All right, and here are his reasons. The conditions were crowded. Okay. The conditions were crowded, much like, you know, sadly, our pounds, animal shelters and things like that we have now, they are very, very crowded, those poor animals. Okay, and the worst part is the dog would have been, I think, all right, would be killed if a home wasn't found. So Mr. Lacey realizes that, oh my goodness, you know, look at, I could save this dog and just bring him home, and it changed his mind once he saw where the dog would have to live. You know, it was very, very crowded. He mentioned that there were at least 10 dogs to a cage, so think about that. And the dog would be killed if they wouldn't find a home for him, if they couldn't find a home. So these are our loose ends. This is the falling action. So after here, when we see that, oh my gosh, the dog is home, here's why. That's our falling action. And then the story ending here, let's choose. How about, ooh, what's it gonna be, guys? What's it gonna be? How about orange? Kind of a red orange. Maybe we'll go more orange. Yes. Okay, how does the story end? Well, we've kind of said it before, right? Mr. Lacey decides to allow Doris to keep the dog and he reminds her again to feed it, right? And it's interesting too because, you know, they're saying how they don't have enough money, they can't afford to adopt a dog because, you know, feeding a dog and caring for a dog is expensive. It is, you know, the food and the care, and you have to make sure they're, you know, they're well and take them to the vet and all those things. It's very expensive. So even though they don't have a lot of money, it was important to him that, you know, he was taking care of the dog too, by reminding his daughter, well, feed the dog, you know. So that was the resolution there. He allows Doris to keep the dog, and he reminds her again to feed it. So very, very cute story with such a nice ending. I just love that short story. All right, you guys. So if you need to go back and fill in any part of your graphic organizer for diagramming a story, you may go back and rewatch this video. Okay, make sure you have all your pieces put into place and put it away in your folder until the next activity. Okay, I will talk to you in the next video.